We want to look more closely tonight at the direction of U.S. foreign policy under President Obama. And so we're going to go right to our Friday roundtable discussion with Gideon Rose, managing editor of Foreign Affairs magazine, and joining us for the first time, Carol Giacomo, a member of the New York Times editorial board who writes about foreign affairs. And a special welcome, Carol.
Thanks.
No slight to you, Gideon, as well. Let's begin right away with very strong international moves that have been made by this administration with the naming of some significant people to posts. But on top of that, we've had 2 missile strikes today already in Pakistan. And then we had an increase of civilian casualties in Afghanistan that there is an uptick there's some concern about. Richard Holbrooke is now the special envoy that's been named. What is his role? What's he supposed to do?
His role is the same as George Mitchell's role will be, I think, which is to cap the problem, try to get it off the agenda, and if at all possible, make things better. And if anybody can do it, it might be Holbrooke. But it's not a job anybody in their right mind would actually want, because the problems are so intractable that it's not quite clear, even with more time and resources and effort, what exactly the solution is.
Well, Carol, let me ask you this, because there seem to be some signals coming early from the Obama administration that Hamid Karzai, the leader of Afghanistan, is perhaps maybe not their favorite in the upcoming elections.
Well, he's actually, he was the favorite of the Americans from the beginning of the Afghanistan operation. But he is falling into disfavor, has fallen into disfavor, partly because he hasn't been able to really run the government well, and because there's a terrible problem with corruption, including, suspicions, allegations about members of his family. So it's a very serious problem, and if you can't try to get a credible government, at least a marginally competent government in Kabul, they're going to have an even harder time to try to put together some kind of political solution for Afghanistan. We're
going to move it along because we have a lot to talk about. George Mitchell now, the next special envoy who's been named for the Middle East. We've just come out of another cycle of violence. There were protests again today in the West Bank. Smart choice?
Excellent choice in the sense that he's got a reputation for fair-mindedness, credibility with both sides, and is a smart, serious, honest player. The problem is the interests of the local parties are so opposed, and they're so emotionally involved in this that it's not entirely clear what he'll be able to do. I think he will be able to achieve some kind of ceasefire, but progress towards a real solution to the problem is probably a long ways off.
Well, can I just add to that, though? I mean, George Mitchell helped to negotiate. I mean, he was the chief negotiator for the Northern Ireland peace deal, which was admittedly, I think this deal in the Middle East is going to be even more intractable. But as Mitchell said yesterday, there were 700 days of failure and 1 day of success. And he's the kind of patient, I think, consistent guy. He's an Arab American. He sends a new signal to the Arabs, I think, that he's going to be perhaps more even-handed in listening to their legitimate complaints. So, I wouldn't be too ebullient about prospects for success, but I think he will be patient about trying to move the ball down, which is something we didn't have in the Bush administration.
Well, let me just point out, you had 3 big names. Hillary Clinton, Richard Holbrooke, and now you've got Special Envoy George Mitchell. How do you handle those egos? How do you keep everybody on the same page? How do you keep everybody in the same time frame?
Well, it's also a question of policy, not just the egos, but who's going to have what authority and responsibility. It can work together if the President and the Secretary of State have a common plan, agree on what they're trying to do, and give clear instructions to their subordinates. If it starts to become a turf battle or an ego contest among any of the players, then you're in for a lot of trouble.
You also have to look, George Mitchell has he's an eminence grise of the Democratic Party, but he also has a reputation as a team player. Holbrooke is a different kind of fellow altogether. He's a huge personality, and he will be more difficult to deal with. But there are a lot of smart people in Washington, and few, I think, have the strategic depth that he does.
Got to move along. Guantánamo, one of the first steps, actually the first major step internationally for the Obama administration. The president signs the order. Did that surprise you as the first move?
It didn't, because of the incredible symbolism this has. Obama has to demonstrate that things are different. On the other hand, there are a lot of major policies he's not going to change. And so Guantánamo was such a flashpoint for the critics of the Bush administration, both here and abroad. He had promised to change it when he came in. I think it makes a great deal of sense to change it, both on its substance. You need a sustainable policy, not an emergency one, for dealing with the war on terror and the people you pick up in it, but also because it's a way of demonstrating without too much actual consequence that things are going to be different now.
But the danger is, how do you do it, and who gets released and who gets held?
This is a problem. I mean, he has said that he will, although he's stopped the military tribunals, he has said that they won't close the prison itself for about a year, and there are something like 250 prisoners still to be dealt with. But you know, it seems as if, from everything we know, that there are a lot of those people haven't perhaps done anything, and they're not a threat to the United States. The few who definitely are a threat, that problem is made worse because the Bush administration pursued abusive policies toward them.
I want to move quickly to yesterday's confirmation hearing for the Treasury Secretary, Timothy Geithner, in which he signaled that the United States may be taking a much tougher stance now against China and the trade deficit. Well, is that a smart move?
I was actually surprised by that. I mean, if this had happened during the campaign, you'd dismiss it as politics for domestic constituencies. If it was somebody else, you'd say they blundered into a spat. Geithner knew exactly what he was doing, and this is after the election. So I interpret it as a sort of shot across the bow to China, a signaling move. I don't think they're actually going to push to get into a trade war with China. It would be insane if they did so. But they're trying to basically gain a little bit of leverage in their negotiations with China by signaling they might want to consider taking a tougher stance.
Carol, 10 seconds.
Ask the question, they couldn't change what Obama had said before, but I agree that I don't think they're going to act on it. This is too shaky, perilous economic environment, and they've got to work with China on a lot of other issues.
Carol, Giacomo, and Gideon Rose, thank you both.